Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our latest update for wholesalers. And just to talk you through what I'm going to present, just give me a moment. Just trying to move on to the next slide. Basically, at the aim, I'm going to cover a number of topics here: recap of FMD, roles and responsibilities. Sorry, I just have to click the recording button. Roles and responsibilities. Where are we now? A little bit about the IMVO alert management guidance. Alert management by wholesalers. We want to talk to you a little bit about NMBS alerts. Brexit obviously continues to be a topic. Then finally, to conclude with the ask of wholesalers and what support is available to you. So starting with the recap of FMD. So as you are aware, the Falsified Medicines Directive, this was passed in 2011, it's a European directive, and it introduced several measures to tackle the growing threat of falsified medicines and to ensure that trade in medicines is rigorously controlled. And there are a number of aspects to this directive, including obligatory safety features and outer packaging of medicines. So that's the 2D barcode and the anti-tampering device. We also then had introduced a common EU-wide logo, which you see in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen there, that's used to identify legal online pharmacies and medicines retailers. And they basically have to be registered in each member state. And here in Ireland, the register is operated by the Pharmaceutical Society of Ireland, the PSI. And when you're in any website where you see this logo, when you click on the logo, it should bring you to the relevant organisation running the register. There were also tighter controls introduced and inspections on producers of APIs, and then finally additional requirements for wholesalers, including extra record keeping. And there was also the whole concept of brokers was introduced as well in this directive. So then in 2016, the Commission published what's called a delegated regulation, or a DR, and this sets out more details about the safety features aspect of the FMD, including the obligations of national medicines verification organisations, manufacturers, MAHs, wholesalers, pharmacies and hospitals. So just to remind you what the European medicines verification looks like, it's basically kind of a hub and spoke type system. So at the heart of it, we have the European hub, which is managed by IMVO. And connected to the EU hub, we have all the different national medicines verification systems, including the Irish Medicines Verification System, IMVS. We also then have pharmaceutical manufacturers and distributors connected directly to the European hub, and they upload data for their packs via the hub, and that then gets sent to the relevant markets where the products are being sold. Parallel distributors, what they have to do is when they repack manufacturers' originate packaging, and so then they remove that, they have to apply new safety features. So that's why they also upload data. So coming then to the national systems and coming to the IMVS specifically, so here in Ireland, we have all the pharmacies, hospitals and wholesalers connected to the system. So these are the parties that are required to verify and decommission medicines. So I suppose one question we get asked all the time, have any falsified medicines been detected to date? None have been detected yet by the IMVS. However, we do know that not all packs have been scanned, so we can't definitively say there have been none. I think it's probably highly unlikely based on what we've seen in other countries where there is full scanning going on. We are aware that there have been cases of stolen packaging being used to infiltrate the illegal supply chain, and with fake medicines having been identified then from anti-tamper device checks elsewhere. So the packaging was the original packaging, but the anti-tamper device, whoever got those fakes, basically identified they'd been interfered with, and that's what really led to the realisation that the contents of the packs were fake. We know that falsified medicines have been identified at wholesaler level by the Czech and Slovakian national medicines verification systems. We're aware that in these cases, they had been received offers from Russian wholesalers to sell them medicines, and that they'd send them photos of the packs. Now, I think a lot of us think, well, the whole thing sounded fairly dodgy to start with, but apparently when the packs were scanned, it turned out they were indeed falsified. I think it's important to remember the European medicines verification system was designed primarily as a deterrent, and it's like having a house alarm. You don't measure the success of the house alarm by the number of times it's activated. You hope the burglar will move on and not come to your house and not activate your alarm. So if we're achieving the objective of it being a deterrent, low detection rates would be expected to be the norm. And I think it's also interesting to note that across Europe in 29 countries, over 11 billion transactions took place in the EMVS in 2022. I think the consensus is that this is making Europe a very unattractive location for counterfeiters. So in the next few slides, I'm just going to talk through roles and responsibilities and focus in particular on IMVO, and then yourselves, what you're required to do as part of this refresher. So from an IMVO perspective, our job is to set up and manage the IMVS and ensure it operates smoothly as a validated system as part of the EMVS. So we are a GXP system. We are subject to the same type of rigor that you would see in your GDP systems in your warehouses, that GMP will be seen in manufacturing operations. We also support pharmacies, hospitals and wholesalers, and we use the term end users to describe everyone who's connected to our system to verify and decommission packs. So we support all end users to connect to the system and assist with any problems that arise. We work with end users and MEHs to minimise voidable alerts, because this question is always asked, well, how do I manage alerts? The best way to manage alerts is actually to stop them happening in the first place, because every alert generates a certain amount of work, regardless of how trivial it is. So it's really important we just try and get rid of all the ones that can be avoided. From the DOR point of view, the delegated regulation point of view, we are required to provide for the immediate investigation of all alerts that represent a potential instance of falsification, and ensure that the HPRA, European Medicines Agency, and EU Commission are notified should the falsification be confirmed. So it's been clarified in guidance that we don't have to do all of the investigation, but we have to at least make sure that someone somewhere is looking into alerts, and that if falsifications are identified, that someone somewhere has notified them to the relevant parties, and we do it ourselves if that hasn't happened. I've given you here this extract from our corporate strategy, because it sets out, I suppose, how the board sees the role of IMVO. So at the core, our purpose is to operate the system, ensure that alerts are investigated, and to work with IMVO, so the European Medicines Verification Organisation, and other IMVOs to ensure seamless operation of the entire European system. Because we're part of a bigger system, so we can't just think about our piece. We need to think about the whole system and how it works. And to that end, we have developed quite an integrated approach to working. So we have a European Change Control Board, and changes to any part of the system have to be approved by all parties. We do a lot of what we call interoperability testing. So if any part of the system, any national system or any part of the hub is changed, then there's a full round of interoperability testing to make sure that all the current versions work together smoothly. The next layer of activity that we're involved in IMVO is to enable and support, and that means we provide end users and MEHs with the support and resources they're required to use the IMVS and to manage alerts seamlessly. And then finally, the outer layer of what we do is adding value. So we're looking, and this is something that's very much on the board's agenda at the moment, is identifying ways in which IMVO and the IMVS can add value for IMVO members, IMVS users, and ultimately for patients. At the end of the day, we're here to protect patients from falsified medicines. So it's really important we always have them at the core of what we do. Looking then at the external agencies, because they're obviously important here as well, we have the Department of Health, and this is responsible for legislation and policy relating to safety features where there's scope for national decisions. So for example, it is the Department of Health that decides the scope of Article 23. We've seen here in Ireland, GPs are not required to decommission, and they're considered to be Article 23 locations, where we know in several other countries, GPs are expected to do their own decommission. So that's an example of how the Department of Health has made a decision here on how to apply that provision. The department is also ultimately, and indeed the government is ultimately accountable to the EU Commission for any non-compliance with EU legislation. National competent authorities, we use the term NCAs to describe these. These are responsible for supervising the IMVS and ensuring that all parties, so that's end users, including yourselves, manufacturers, MEHs, and IMVO, comply with their obligations. So, for example, we expect in due course to be inspected by the HPRA as part of their supervision of what we do. So, the HPRA oversees, they look specifically manufacturers, MEHs, wholesalers, and us, and they lead the follow-up if falsified medicines are identified. The PSI then is responsible for monitoring compliance by retail pharmacy businesses and pharmacists. The HSE then, as you know, they had set up a project team to manage FMD implementation in all the public health service locations, and that has worked very well. They got things up and running in a very efficient way, and it's working pretty smoothly. Now, just coming then to the specific roles and responsibilities of wholesalers. So when do you have to verify medicines? And as you know, the DOR specifies that, and I've given at the bottom of these slides the relevant articles of the delegated regulation or DOR. So you have to apply a risk-based approach. At a minimum, the following must be verified. So returns from customers or another wholesaler, all stock received from any wholesaler other than the manufacturer or a wholesaler who is designated by the MEH by means of a written contract, i.e. a designated wholesaler. This is the term that's used to describe them. And you're also aware it is not necessary to verify stock where it changes ownership but remains in the physical possession of the same wholesaler. So say, for example, you have stock in on a consignment from an MAH and they sell the stock, say, to a hospital, you haven't yet delivered it. You don't have to verify those packs. So say they sell the stock to you after it arrives, then and there's an invoice raised, you don't have to verify. And also, you don't have to verify stock where it's distributed between wholesalers belonging to the same wholesaler legal entity and no sale takes place. So if you move it from one depot to another, you don't have to verify. Now, we just want to mention designated wholesalers, because this is something the HPRA is interested in. And we know what they're interested in is how wholesalers check if they themselves are a designated wholesaler or if they're receiving packs from a designated wholesaler. So that information is available in the IMVS. For any given product, you can identify from the IMVS who are the designated wholesalers for that product. So there could be one, could be more than one, there could be none. It depends on how the MAH distributes the products. So the FMD software has to be programmed to pull this information from the IMVS. Now, there's two ways to do this, and that's actually on our website, so I won't get into the detail here. I think it's important to note that if you're seeking the designated wholesaler for a pack that's not released for sale in Ireland, so for example, an unlicensed pack from the UK, the data for that pack is not in the Irish system, so therefore the IMVS will not be able to provide the designated wholesaler information for those packs because we simply don't have that data in our system. If your FMD software doesn't have the functionality to allow you to run those reports, you need to contact the MAH for the product to find out who the designated wholesalers are. Now, verification, then we just want to explain that in a little bit more detail. What does this mean? It means scanning the 2D barcode to verify the authenticity of the unique identifiers against the data held in the IMVS. This verification may be done anytime after receipt of the pack and prior to dispatch. Products that are flagged as decommissioned in the IMVS when you verify them. So if they're marked already as dispensed, recalled, stolen, withdrawn, stolen, etc., you cannot distribute them. Packs, the legislation says that packs flagged as potentially falsification, so-called level 5 alerts, and the alert message will tell you it's a level 5 alert, will tell you it's one of these, must be reported to the National Competent Authority. Now, what we have done is to avoid wholesalers and pharmacies and manufacturers having to directly report all alerts to the HPRA. We have set up the IMVS so that all alerts generated are automatically sent to the HPRA, and that fulfills this requirement for yourselves. You don't have to do it separately. So when do wholesalers then have to decommission packs? So decommission means you're basically, you're not just verifying that the data matches what's in the system, but you're also changing the state of the pack. And generally you're changing it from active to decommissioned, and it's effectively at the point at which it's been taken out of the supply chain. Stock being physically distributed outside the EU, that has to be decommissioned as exported. In fact, my last point about when you take it out of the supply chain, it's actually when you take it out of the supply chain within the EU. So if it's going outside the EU, it's decommissioned as exported. So effectively, it's gone from the European EMVS at that point. Obviously, stocks going to the UK should not be decommissioned as exported because there are derogations in place relating to Brexit. You're familiar with those. Returns, you must decommission returns that cannot be returned to saleable stock, and they will typically be you mark them for destruction. Packs being supplied as samples to competent authorities. So if the HPRA comes in and asks for samples of packs in your shelves, then you can mark them as samples. Packs being supplied to persons or institutions covered by the Article 23 exemption. And it's important to remember that the Article 23 exemption cannot be applied to medicines supplied to so-called healthcare institutions, i.e. hospitals, in or outpatient clinics or health centres. So that's defined in the delegated regulation and in national legislation. So next piece is, where are we at now? So we obviously ended our use and learn period in May 2022. Some countries use the term stabilisation period, we call it use and learn. So since then, weekly end user alert rates have fallen to 0.05% or less. So that would have been our target. And I think there's been great work done by yourselves, by pharmacies, by hospitals and MAHs to minimise avoidable alerts. And that's what's brought that alert rate right down. Scanning and decommissioning rates have improved. There's still a gap in community pharmacy. In some pharmacies, most pharmacies are doing the decommission they need to, a few are not doing enough. And this is something the PSI is responsible for actioning, following up on. So they're the enforcement body for that. We've certainly seen an increase in pharmacy and hospital engagement with ourselves. We've always had great engagement from wholesalers, so we don't even need to know that it's improved because it's always been very good. And again, we're also seeing more and more usage of our alert management system, NMBS alerts, by end users and MAHs. We have issued a lot of communications to pharmacies and hospitals on the most common issues to help prevent further alerts. And we tend to deal directly, there's a missing word there, with wholesalers. So if we see particular problems in a wholesale operation, we just tend to go directly to the wholesaler in questions. We don't tend to see patterns of issues across all wholesalers. So it's a different type of practice to pharmacies and hospitals. We've also had continuous improvement of the entire IMVO and also the Irish Medicines Verification System to enhance the user experience and eliminate system-related alerts. I think it's important to note how, we hear a lot of people saying, oh, there's lots of alerts out there and that's causing chaos in pharmacies. The reality is that's not the case. And one of the things we do is every month we look to see how often did pharmacies get alerts during June 23, because these are the ones we worry that are potentially delaying patients getting medicines. And if you look for June, 50% of pharmacies on the 50 percentile, so they got no alerts last month. And even if you go up to the 90 percentile, those pharmacies got 90% of pharmacies had 3 or fewer alerts during this period. So very few alerts in pharmacies. Once the software, the scanner are under control and they avoid double decommission, double scanning things, they tend to have very few alerts. So I think that's good for all of us, because I think it certainly doesn't create any issues with packs coming back to yourselves. It means less work for everyone investigating alerts and less risk of patients not getting medicines. So one of the most common causes of alerts in Ireland is exempt medicinal products are a huge problem for us. And there's 2 reasons for this. And one is covered in the next point, the Brexit effect. Packs sourced from the UK as EMPs are via batch-specific request. So this batch-specific request is where the MAH is granted a temporary authorisation to bring packs into Ireland as Irish authorised packs that may not have been printed or generated for the Irish market. So often they are UK packs. One of the problems we have is that there is no obligation in the UK now to upload data to the UK system since Brexit. Now, if you're sending the packs to Northern Ireland, you're supposed to upload the data, but so we see very different approaches to data upload. The problem is that these packs come into Ireland as exempt medicinal products or as batch-specific requests, and they're scanned and the data hasn't been uploaded, they will generate alerts. Now, we've had great cooperation from the UK MAHs in uploading this data. So we contact them and say, look, your packs are in the Irish market. Please update it, even though it's not mandatory, they will do it. But that option will be gone from us when we get to the Windsor framework coming into effect, which I'll mention later on. The other aspect problem we see with exempt medicinal products is we've seen particular problems with HRT products over the last years. They've been very short. There's been a lot of media coverage, particularly last summer. And we would have seen a lot of them sourced from outside the EU. And we've seen for particular products, batches and batches that had been exported outside the EU to Switzerland. So they were decommissioned as exported and now being brought back into Ireland. And they have caused large numbers of alerts because they are being scanned. So we have issued advice to pharmacies and hospitals not to scan unlicensed medicines or exempt medicinal products and to try and avoid this problem, because they are strictly speaking out of scope of FMD, but we still know that they do get scanned. The other place where we get a lot of alerts at the moment is packs borrowed by pharmacies that are already decommissioned in the lending location. So they arrive into the borrowing pharmacy already decommissioned, and when they try to decommission them, it generates an alert. We see alerts due to wholesaler errors, so hospital aggregation. We know some of you provide a service to hospitals where you create data files by scanning packs in a tote, sending invoices with those packs embedded in the barcode that is then scanned at the other end, which basically unpacks all those barcodes and uploads it to the hospital FMD software where they're decommissioned. We have seen many examples of where what's in the tote doesn't match what's in the invoice. So the packs that were actually included in the barcode are sent to another pharmacy, and it just creates all sorts of problems. So it's very important, if you're offering that service, you need to be absolutely rigorous about making sure that the barcode with the packs embedded in it, that those packs actually match what's sent to the hospital and that they're not sent somewhere else. The other thing we see is from time to time repeat scanning. So we sometimes see this where there's a requirement to decommission large quantities of packs, say they're going into quarantine or they're being destroyed. And often it's just simply operator error when they're dealing with large quantities. So, these things happen and there's no particular issue with that. It's just really to make sure when you're doing those type of large decommissioning operations that there's a very clear what's not decommissioned yet, moving to a different pile that's already decommissioned to reduce the chance of this. We do see some MAH procedural errors. We do see delays in data upload. We sometimes see where packs come in prior to batch release, the data may not have been uploaded, you see wholesalers may scan them, and the advice there would just be for the MAH to make sure they tell you the data hasn't been uploaded yet pending conclusion of the batch release. We see again repeat decommissioning transactions by wholesalers. Again, some of them say they're destroying stock that's in the warehouse or say they're about to export that stock. That's where we see problems. We also see alerts where the HPRA has granted exemptions for packs with the incorrect barcode information to ensure continuity of supply. So we know there's a problem with the barcode. We know that the data in it doesn't match within the EMVS, but sometimes supply is so critical that they have to allow those packs. So we've seen examples recently of caution and use notices being sent with these packs to pharmacies, which is great. But the problem is some of them have been cold chain packs. So when they go into the fridge, the caution and use notice is taken away and then they're scanned when they're taken out of the fridge. So we do communicate to pharmacies when we see these, but we have discussed this issue with the HPRA as well, that really there needs to be some thought given to the practical issues with these. So every week we do an analysis of our assessment of alert root causes. Now, in some cases, we know for sure that these are the root causes because the end user, the MAH, is confirmed on their side that they agree this is what it is, or they know what it is. Sometimes we, based on our knowledge of alerts and the type of issues that arise, we can make a fairly good guess. But sometimes, for example, a double decommission by a pharmacy, we need them to just simply confirm to us that that's what's happened. So this is our analysis every week. So the ones that are in the lighter colour in the top half of the table, they're the ones where the alerts are seen at end user level and are potentially slowing, leaving patients without access to medicine if that alert isn't investigated fully and falsification ruled out. The bottom half then would be where we see issues at either wholesale or manufacturer level, so there's no immediate impact. So you can see that the unlicensed medicines in week 26 accounted for 291 alerts, decommissioned at multiple locations. A lot of those are these borrowed packs in pharmacies, 214. You see there's a whopping 4,482 alerts for one MAH. That was one double decommission attempt, and you can see it really pushes up the alert total for the week. And so on and so on. So in a good week, we get about 700 alerts. In a bad week, we get about 1,000. So all things considered, things have improved dramatically. Software issues, there's a few there at the moment, but generally more than that, scanner issues have pretty much gone away. We saw in week 26 there's 78 scanner alerts. That's the highest it's been for weeks. That's probably someone who's just bought a new scanner and needs reconfiguring. So when we see that, we contact the pharmacy and help them to rescan it. It can happen yourselves with your own warehouses. You buy a new scanner, you shift it to a different piece of equipment, it may be incompatible. So if you have any problems with scanners like that, just contact us and we can help you get them reconfigured correctly. So in the next few slides, I just want to talk briefly about the IMVO alert management guidance. So there's a hyperlink to it there. It defines the high-level alert handling process for pharmacies, hospitals, wholesalers, MAHs, and IMVO. So this guidance was drawn up last year in consultation with stakeholders and also with HPRA, PSI, pharmacies, hospitals, etc. The objective of this guidance is to ensure that alerts are quickly investigated and closed out if root causes found, enabling the pack to be supplied, returned, saleable stock as soon as possible. So that's our objective, is to keep the packs moving, find out quickly if it's some sort of a non-issue and make sure then it's closed out and allow the pack to be supplied. And a key principle underpinning the guidance is that alert doesn't actually mean that the pack is fake. And I think that was probably our thinking in the early days. Now we've come to realize it's simply a signal that something doesn't match and we need to look into it. So it doesn't mean that the pack is definitively falsified or defective, as alerts can arise due to technical, procedural or system-related issues. The guidance also describes the process for escalation of the alert as a confirmed falsification to the HPRA if no root cause can be found. So the HPRA basically don't get involved until we've got to the point where the MAH is pretty clear that this is actually confirmed falsification. So what's out of scope of the guidance? So investigation of alerts other than level 5 alerts. So level 5 alerts are the ones that are potential falsification. So there are lots of other non-level 5 alerts. I'll explain that in a moment. HPRA processes are out of scope. Alert prevention activities are out of scope. Related to credit, refund, replacement of packs that cannot be supplied to patients due to an unresolved alert. Now, typically, these will only be the ones where maybe the pack has to be returned for analysis. And the reason this is not covered in the guidance is these matters are outside the remit of IMVO, HPRA and PSI. So it's a matter for wholesalers, manufacturers and the relevant pharmacy to discuss that between them. How are alerts investigated? So when an alert is generated, so say as an end user, as a wholesaler, if an alert is generated in your warehouse, the expectation is that you and the MAH will start looking at that alert straight away. From a wholesaler end user perspective, what you do is you look for procedure errors. So has the pack been decommissioned twice? That would be an example of one. There are others. In this case, if you know what has happened, the error is documented and the pack may be supplied as long as there's no reason to suspect it's falsified. So if you've ruled out procedural errors, the next thing is to look at technical issues, and these include scanner and software. So there's some sort of a data mismatch. Once fixed, so say your scanner wasn't working, it was misconfigured, it was sending the wrong data, it was reading the barcode wrong and sending the wrong data to the IMVS. So an example of what that might look like is it's not configured to read lowercase letters, or it's not configured to work properly when caps lock is on. So you're sending batch IDs with lowercase letters, but they're converting them to caps. So obviously they don't match what's in the system. So once you fix those issues, you can verify the pack again, and if successful, the pack can be supplied. From an MAH perspective, they look for data issues and things like issues with the EMVS. We don't expect them, for example, to investigate things like double decommissioning in pharmacies, because that's something that will not be related to anything that the MAH has done. The MAH may request a photo of the pack. That might be enough to help them confirm that the pack is either genuine, or alternatively, they might be able to clearly see that it's falsified. From an IMVO perspective, the guidance says that we step in if there's no feedback from anyone within 2 working days. So basically, we've heard nothing about this alert within 2 working days from either the end user or the MAH. And obviously, given our role, our requirement to make sure that alerts are investigated, this is why we need to step in. And we will ask for the alert to be investigated if not already done. If the end user MAH doesn't provide whatever assistance or information we need to enable the alert to be investigated, so if we can't close it because we don't have enough information and repeated attempts to get that information have failed, then the guidance is we escalate it to the relevant NCA, because ultimately it becomes then an issue of non-compliance with the requirement to verify and authenticate packs before supply. So for wholesalers, the escalation would be to the HPRA. For pharmacies, it would be to the PSI. So we haven't gone down the route of doing this yet, but it's certainly something that, it's there if we need it. So how will the end user know what the issue is? Now, I suppose the first point is probably primarily aimed at community pharmacies and hospitals, but it will also potentially apply to wholesalers as well. We ask the end user FMD software providers to include a link from the on-screen alert message. So when you're scanning the pack, you're looking at a screen to see what's returned. That should have a link to a help page on our website, and that help page is bespoke to the particular type of alert, and it tells you for that particular type of alert exactly what you need to look for, how you can try and work out what's going on. And it also will tell you if you can fix it. So for example, if it's a scanner issue, it'll tell you here's how you can reconfigure your scanner and then what to do next. So we do know that these help pages, we monitor the traffic in terms of people linking into these and accessing them, and we do see continuous use of them. So I think that's very useful. The other thing is, while we don't proactively get involved, we may not get involved in every single individual alert, but every day, what we do is we actually monitor the system continuously for large numbers of alerts or unusual patterns of alerts by product or end users. So for example, the system is programmed to send us an email if there's more than 10 alerts in a pharmacy or a wholesaler, say, in a given day, because it's suggesting something's going on. We will either contact yourselves or the MAH or the FMD software provider. So say, for example, we see a pattern of alerts in the pharmacy that looks like a software issue, or we see that type of pattern of alerts in multiple pharmacies using the same software, then we will actually just go directly to the FMD software provider. And really what we want to do here is take action to prevent further alerts. And what we're trying to do is the issues that lead to large numbers of alerts, so for example, faulty scanner or software issue, or say missing data with the batch, that these are quickly identified and resolved with our support. So what happens if you've got an alert and you know it's not due to anything on your side? So you've ruled out a scanner, a software, a procedural issue with the wholesaler. So it has to be withheld from stock, i.e. quarantine, until you basically have to wait for the MAH to say, they'll either tell you they've identified the root cause and fixed it, so it's fine, or really they've ruled out all possible root causes and now they're looking to examine the pack because they can't find any end user error, there's no data or systems issues. So now we have to really start to think about this pack being potentially falsified or suspected falsification. In the early days of FMD, what we heard from pharmacies was if we get packs with alerts, we're just going to send them back to the wholesalers. So the HPRA has been very clear that that shouldn't happen. So what they've said is that where alerts are generated at pharmacies or hospitals, packs with alerts must be retained in the location where they're scanned and not returned to the wholesaler as part of standard business returns. They should await feedback from the MAH and next steps. Now that the MAH might say to send it back to the primary distributor, but that'll be a completely separate process to the standard business returns. So what happens if there's suspected and a confirmed falsification? So if data, procedural and technical issues have been ruled out following conclusion of the end user and MAH investigation, the pack is considered a suspected falsification. At this point, the MAH wants to examine the pack. If they cannot confirm that the pack is genuine from the examination, it's considered a confirmed falsification and the HPRA, IMVO, etc. are informed at that stage, and then the HPRA will take over and will manage. There'll be a very big investigation at that point. So the next few slides then I want to talk a little bit about the specifics of alert management by wholesalers, just to talk you through the types of alerts we see, the root causes, what you need to do, and so on. So firstly, I want to talk a little bit about the scan responses. So when you verify or decommission a pack, your software displays a response which contains text and is color coded. So we've asked FMD software providers to color code all responses, and we've identified what responses are to be assigned the different colours. Amber and red responses indicate there's some mismatch between the information from the scan and what's in the IMVO. It's a problem with the scan itself, so some action is needed. Green, obviously, it's good to go. So looking then at alerts, so these are the potential falsifications. So those red responses, which represent potential falsification, are so-called alerts, and they're recognised as follows. So the message will actually tell you an alert is being raised. So you could get some red responses that are not alerts. So for example, if the pack has expired, you will get a red response because you cannot supply that pack. But the ones we're talking here about, there are potential falsification alerts and they need to investigate it. So you will see alert has been raised. You will see a unique alert ID. Your software may or may not be programmed to present that on screen, but it will be available within the software. And also our alert management system will automatically send you an email for these alerts. All these level 5 alerts are automatically notified to ourselves, to the MAH for the product, and to the HPRA. So the system does that. And these have to be investigated and falsification ruled out before the pack can be supplied. All other scan responses then are known as exceptions. So just to give you some examples of level 5 alerts generated from wholesalers. So for example, pack not found, scanner or software, what are the root causes? And these are the typical root causes. Obviously falsification could be a root cause, but what are the most common root causes? Generally a scanner or software issue. Data uploaded, not uploaded by the MAH could be a factor, but it's less likely for this pack not found alert. If it's a batch not found, it could be scanner or software issue, or it could be data not uploaded by the MAH. Now that could be that they have forgotten to upload it. It could be they uploaded it and for some reason it didn't actually arrive in the Irish Medicines Verification System. Or the third category is they haven't uploaded it yet because the batch hasn't been batch released. A batch ID mismatch, so this is typically a scanner or software issue. Expiry date mismatch the same. Pack already in the requested state, so this may be where an operator tries to scan a pack that they've already decommissioned. So what do you do next? So for the ones where the pack isn't found, the batch isn't found, or there's some sort of mismatch, you look for technical issues. You maybe try verifying another pack from the same batch with a different scanner to see if the scanner is the problem. Is the scanner configured correctly? Is caps lock on? Is there a problem with your software? And if you can resolve it, then verify the pack again and is successfully continued. If it looks like a procedural error, it seems more just go and ask the operator what might have happened and often they'll be able to tell you. And we've plenty of examples of where a wholesaler would phone us and say, look, we've just realised an operator has accidentally decommissioned a few packs, so they pick it up themselves and let us know. And obviously modify the process if required to prevent recurrence. You know, it's just some workflow management might help prevent the issue arising again. So exceptions which are not level 5 alerts. Any response from a scan without a unique alert ID is not a level 5 alert. As I've mentioned, some responses some of these responses may be flagged as reds. For example, pack is expired. Exceptions which are not level 5 alerts, they're not recorded in our alert management system, but they will appear in the software logs in your FMD software. And it's very important that you review all alerts, exceptions, generation, returns, as some of them may mean that the pack cannot be returned to saleable stock or that other action is required because you're doing verification scans. And sometimes you see, if you do a verification scan, you'll get an exception, where if you did a decommissioning scan, the same issue would lead to an alert. So you do need to follow up on all these exceptions, particularly on returns. So the types of non-level 5 exceptions generated when you get a return. So if you get a message the pack is already decommissioned, the root cause here was the pack was decommissioned at your site. So these packs cannot be returned to saleable stock in a decommissioned state. You can try to reverse the decommissioning action. So you can do this for packs that were marked as supplied, locked, or samples. You have a 10-day window in which to do this. And if you are able to recommission or reverse it was sometimes called recommissioning, reactivating, reversing decommission, all those terms are used. If that's successful, then your pack can be put back and you can continue with your normal returns process. If you get the message the pack has already been decommissioned in another location, so the pack is either decommissioned by the customer or elsewhere, and I have a separate slide now on this because there are some specifics around this. These packs cannot be returned to saleable stock because you can't reactivate or recommission them. So if someone else has decommissioned them, only that location can recommission them. You can't do it. It's a matter for you to decide whether you'll take these packs back. Pharmacies and hospitals have been advised that wholesalers may not take back decommissioned packs. If you do decide, sometimes we're aware that wholesalers do send the packs back to their customers, particularly if you feel that they've probably done the decommissions. It's really important you do this as quickly as possible because they have a 10-day window from the date in which they originally decommissioned the pack to reverse this step. And we have seen situations where the pack was decommissioned, was sent back to the wholesaler within the 10-day window, but unfortunately by the time the wholesaler returned it back to the pharmacy, it had gone beyond the 10-day window, so the pharmacy couldn't recommission the pack. And it gets very messy because then the wholesaler, if they take the pack back, it can't go into saleable stock. Then the whole question, who pays for the pack, comes up. And we've seen it arise with some very expensive packs. And obviously, as we've mentioned before, we don't give guidance on what commercial arrangements are made for these packs, but they do cause some friction. And keep in mind that during use and earn that you may have supplied the customer with the pack that was already returned to you in a decommissioned state. Now, given that it's years since use and earn ended, this is becoming less and less of a fact. We do see it happen in odd time. So it may actually be not the customer's fault that the pack was decommissioned, but that it's the one you sent out to them in the first place. So we can help you to look at the audit trail from that pack to work out what happened. If the message indicates that the pack is exported or locked, so if that's the decommissioning message you get, the hospital or pharmacy couldn't have decommissioned to this state as their FMD software doesn't permit them to do so. So chances are either you sent it to them in this state or someone else gave them that pack in that export or locked state, but they certainly couldn't have applied that. They're not allowed to decommission to use those two functions because they're limited to wholesalers. Some other examples of level 5 alerts. So product not found, and this is a very common one. This is for a non-FMD pack was scanned, for example, a medical device. If you believe that this is actually a medicinal product, so if you see a PA and PL number, please contact us because there could be something odd going on with that pack. I think it's review the process for identifying what's in and out of scope of FMD to ensure non-FMD packs are not scanned in the future. The other one you might get is a batches recalled message. So it might be the case that since you sent the pack out to the customer, the pack has been recalled, and you just go to your standard recall notifications and follow the instructions issued by the MAH. sometimes see level 5 exceptions when you reactivate returns from Article 23 customers. So if you do decommission for your Article 23 customers and they send those packs back to you, only you can reverse that decommissioning action. They can't, you have to do it. So when you get those returns back and you want to put them back into stock, so you need to recommission them. It's when you try to do that, if you get pack can not be reactivated, time limit exceeded, then this 10-day window has elapsed. So I think it's important that you perhaps think about your returns process for Article 23 customers and emphasise the need to return the packs within the 10-day window if they don't need them. The pack cannot be reactivated, it's already active. If that's the case, so most likely that you didn't actually supply that pack in the first case. If you had decommissioned it for an Article 23 customer, only you would be able to reactivate it. And what you can do here is contact ourselves and we can help identify where the pack was reactivated. And we won't be able to tell you, but we can certainly liaise with the other party and try and work out what's going on. Pack cannot be reactivated if it was decommissioned in another location. Assuming that all the packs you supplied to that customer decommissioned by you, the pack that they've sent back to you was not supplied by you. So it's a matter for you to follow up with the customer there. I just want to mention intermarket transactions very briefly, or IMTs as we sometimes call them. So IMT transaction, it describes the functionality used when a pack scanned in Ireland was not originally intended for sale here. So classic example, exempt medicinal product, unlicensed medicine. So what happens in this case is if there's a barcode on the pack, there's no data found in our system, but the system does recognise the product code. A query is sent to the European hub and it'll then work out the market where the pack was originally intended to be sold. So it'll find out where it knows which markets where there's data. It then sends a query to that national system and it allows us to be authenticated within that market. And you'll get a message back to say that the pack is fine. There is a greater risk of alerts with IMTs because there's more transactions involved and there's other systems involved. And if any part of the system is down or there's delays, potentially system timeouts can lead to alerts if the transaction fails, so you don't manage to actively decommission the pack or verify it. It's important to note that bulk verification is not supported for intermarket transactions, only for single pack verification. Now, what I want to do is talk a little bit about IMVS alerts, which is our alert management system. I'm sure all of you are very familiar with this. So I suppose it's really important that there are good communications during alert investigations. Given that there's a few different parties involved in every alert, it's important that we actually talk to each other during an alert investigation. So if an end user, so for example, you yourselves as a wholesaler, if you find a root cause for the alert, it's important that you tell the MAH and ourselves so that we can stop our investigations. Equally, if you can't find anything on your side, you will need to know what the MAH has found and that the pack is genuine before it can be supplied. If there's no obvious root cause, the MAH may want to get in touch with you to request a photo of the pack or ask for the pack to be returned for examination. So this all requires communication paths between the different parties. IMVS alerts is the recommended communications tool to use, and I'll explain in a moment exactly how it works, because really the alternative, email and phone, would significantly slow everything down. So just looking very briefly at IMVS alerts, what's it all about? So it's a collaborative tool which facilitates efficient handling of alerts by allowing all the relevant parties to manage, track and document alerts. So all the alerts are recorded in IMVS alerts and all the information that's inputted by the end user, the MAH and or ourselves is all recorded and available at that time. So it's real-time information on the status of alerts based on information entered by any of those parties. And ourselves with the MAH can close out the alert and mark it as, then there's definitive, it's definitely not a falsified medicine. I know, for example, here in IMVO, we use IMVS alerts as our repository of information and all our alert management activity for a given alert. We're aware that a number of wholesalers do that and only bring really the significant alerts into the incident system within your quality management system. And the HPRA, I think, is aware of that as well. It also allows you to quickly communicate with other parties about an alert while preserving end user anonymity vis-a-vis the MAH, which is the core principle of the EMVS. So the EMVS is designed that if you or a pharmacy or hospital carry out any sort of transaction in the EMVS, or if there's any communications, the MAH does not see who the end user is. So for example, in NMVS alerts, when the MAH logs in, they do not see the name and address of the end user And the alert for we as the IMVO, when we log in, we can see it. Now, this end user anonymity piece is very important to pharmacists, and it's something the European Pharmacy Organization is very much pushing, that this is never breached. We find wholesalers and MAHs, there tends to be less issues. They tend to talk to each other directly about alerts anyway, and that's fine, that's their choice. The other thing is the system maintains an audit trail of your own actions for inspection purposes. So this is certainly one of the reasons why we do it. We have a full record of everything we've done with every alert maintained in NMBS alerts, and you can do the same. So it's a web-based application which is available 24/7. End users can upload pack photos if requested by the MAH. And NCAs also have the option to use NMBS alerts, so they could go in and look and see what's happening with alerts. They can apply comments to individual alerts. Now, the HPRA is not yet doing this, but we know, for example, in Slovenia, they monitor activity by all parties and investigate alerts. So they go in and they look at individual alerts in the alert management system in Slovenia. So all level 5 alerts generated by end users are recorded in NMBS alerts. So the question is, how do you use it? So first of all, you can set up an account, and you can open an account in NMBS alerts, so it's free of charge. There's no charge for doing that. And that allows you at any time to log in and see all your own alerts. And obviously it also allows you to report feedback about an alert. If you want to set up an account, just email that email address there. The alternative is, if you don't want to set up an account, which we would strongly encourage you to set up an account, it's a much easier way to manage things. But if you just want to do it this way, when an alert is generated in your software, you will actually get an automated email from NMBS alerts, and it'll give you a link to the page in NMBS alerts with information on that alert. And basically, if you go in there, you can upload whatever information you have about, so for example, if your scanner wasn't working, you accidentally decommissioned the pack several times, you can record that there. So you don't need to have an account in NMBS alerts to receive the link, and you can also use the link to send photos as well as reporting information. That's a one-time link, so it will expire. There's something else I was going to say there about that. No, I think that's all good there. So Brexit, I just want to mention very briefly. I really don't have a huge amount new to report, other than we are continuing to monitor the impact of Brexit from an F&D perspective. We've already mentioned that the high reliance in Ireland on pack source in the UK to address medicines is now more challenging, especially when they're serialised and the data has not been uploaded to the UK system, so we see more alerts. We're involved in ongoing discussions with IMVO about the implementation and the operational aspects of Brexit changes to the NBS, because there have been some. And then obviously the Department of Health and the HPRA about the impact of FMD aspects of Brexit on medicine supply in Ireland. And we also work very closely with the other heavily impacted NMBOs, so the Northern Ireland, in Malta and Cyprus NMBOs. You'll be familiar with Windsor Framework, which introduced basically a series of measures. It was a political agreement reached earlier this year, which effectively removed Northern Ireland out of all the EU medicines legislation requirements, including FMD. So FMD will cease to apply in Northern Ireland once the Windsor Framework takes effect. So the UK government, they recently announced, and the link is there to the announcement, that these measures will take effect on 1st January 2025. New medicines, so what they've said, the UK government, is new medicines to the UK market must carry the UK only label to be allowed onto the UK market, including Northern Ireland. These products may not be sold in the UK and will not be available in Ireland or elsewhere in the EU. So this is a high level political view that the impact of this Windsor Framework is there will be no UK packs in any EU country. Now, clearly that has very significant supply implications in Ireland and indeed other markets such as Malta and Cyprus. This is being looked at in detail to see, what can be done to mitigate any potential increase in shortages here as a result of this, and how exactly this is going to work in practice. The other piece is that medicines going into Northern Ireland will not display 2D barcodes and serial numbers that are compliant with FMD. Now, they may have barcodes, but they most likely will not have serial numbers in the EU format. And the expected consequence of all of that is the UK system will be disconnected from the EU hub. And that means then that the option we have now for UK EMPs to upload the data to the UK system, allowing them to scan successfully here, that will be gone. So the assessment of the impact of the Windsor framework from an F&D perspective required mitigating measures is continuing. Now, just moving to, at the end of this, to the ask of wholesalers. I think it's really important to keep working to prevent alerts due to software, scanner, etc. It's very important if you change anything, you get a new scanner, you add new equipment, you have a software update. Sometimes even something like an antiviral update can throw off FMD software. We've seen that happen. So just make sure everything's working after that happens. Notify us as soon as possible the outcome of your alert investigation. So that's via NMBS alerts ideally and via that link. And just coming back to that link, what I should have said is you will get the link the day you get a link to the alert and NMBS alerts the day the alert is generated. You will also get a reminder 2 days later asking you to investigate the alert. And if we haven't heard from you 2 working days later, and if we still haven't heard from you 4 working days after that second email, you'll get another email. And really, where we're ultimately going to get to is a point if a wholesaler or any end user is not engaged with us at all after that 3rd email, that's the point at which we will start to escalate to the NCAs. That's what they are looking for. I think it's important to take steps to prevent recurrence of alerts. So if something's happened, things like the double decommissioning thing, just check your procedures to see can you stop it happening again. Be sure that the customers in your Article 23 list are not doing their own decommission. We have seen that in a few cases where wholesalers did Article 23 decommission and it turned out the hospital or whatever, the nursing home in question was doing their own. If you offer an aggregation service to hospitals, just make sure there's no mismatch, as I mentioned before, between the pack scanned and the pack sent to the hospital. One of the things that a lot of wholesalers do, particularly primary wholesalers, is exceptionally useful is they scan a sample of packs received from the MAH at goods inwards. In fact, we know it's now built into a number of the MAH technical agreements. What this does is if the data hasn't been uploaded, there's some problem with the data, it identifies the problem really early on and allows time to fix it rather than these packs ending up in pharmacies and hospitals causing alerts. It's important to decide what you will do if your customer sent back decommissioned packs that can't be returned to saleable stock. One of the things, and this was a HPRA suggestion, is we recommend that you ask them to confirm returning packs that they are active, maybe some sort of a tick box in the returns form. In relation to your IMVS account in general, so this is the account you use to connect to the IMVS. If there's any change in your super user, make sure you tell us because we often, occasionally we may have need to contact the super user. If you don't know who that person is, contact us and let you know. And if you need any help setting up a new location, so a new location would mean a new address, a new warehouse. Adding new equipment would mean a new PC or whatever, doing FMD within an existing registered location. If you need any help with that or changing FMD software, just contact us and we'll talk you through what needs to be done if you're not familiar with it. So finally then, support available from IMVO, our service desk which takes phone calls and emails to our info email address. It's open 8 to 8 Monday to Friday, 9 to 6 on Saturdays and 11 to 6 on Sundays. Now obviously there's a limit to how far we can go with dealing with queries out of business hours, particularly if there's something we need feedback from an MAH, we may not be able to get to the following business day, but certainly the service desk can deal with a lot of the standard queries that come in. They have standard scripts available to answer all of those. If you want to contact us about an alert, use NMBS alerts or email alert support@imvo.ie. And if you've got any IMVS account queries, as I said, registration@imvo.ie. And those 2 email accounts are only monitored during business hours. The urgent stuff out of hours, please use the phone or email the service desk. Our website has a very good FAQ question. We're adding to it all the time, so hopefully you'll find what you're looking for there. We also have a wholesaler section on the website, which hopefully will be useful. We have guidance videos on a range of topics, including NMBS alerts on our YouTube channel. If you're wondering, is the IMVS live? We have a link there where you can actually log in and it'll give you the current status of the IMVS. Generally, we have very little downtime. The system is very stable, so we're very pleased with that. We also run bespoke support sessions for pharmacies by phone, Zoom or Teams, but we can also provide that to wholesalers if you're interested in that. We're very happy to provide that service. And then for more information, follow us on social media, LinkedIn and Twitter, and then we have the HPRA website, and there's also a link there to the Commission Q&A and safety features. And then finally, meet the team. There's myself, the Chief Executive, Colin McNamee, somebody I know, our Operations Manager, Peter Gordon, our IT Manager, again, you may know Lorraine Leahy is our quality manager, because obviously we have a very big QMS, so Lorraine works on that, and Sarah, our administration communications executive, also does some support work for the QMS. So Sarah is the person who deals with your IMVS account queries. And then we have Paul and Guilherme, our operations executives, who manage alerts in relation to queries and things like scan ratios and that type of thing. So we have photos there, I think, for everyone except Aisha. So you know what we look like. Okay, so that's basically all I have. So I'm going to stop sharing, and we'll stop the recording, and we will open then the chat, or if anyone wants to go off mute, you can just let us know and we can answer your questions.